Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Has caught my attention over the last couple of days. Okay. And I've said this pretty consistently. We don't do a ton of college football recruiting on this show as opposed to college basketball. College basketball, one player can change everything. Boogie Flan takes Florida from a fringe top 25 team to a top 10 team. AJ DeBonsa changed everything at BYU. I think even Darren Peterson. What is Kansas without Darren Peterson? College football is different, right? It's not so much an individual player, but it's the totality. The full, you need 25, 30 guys in a class between high school and the portal, and you have to do it year over year over year over year to add bodies to the program to get to a point where you can compete with the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Texases, whatever. Well, that's it. Anytime something interesting happens, we talk about it. We certainly talked about it when Texas A&M signed the #1 class in the history of planet Earth. Didn't really work out, but it was still an interesting story. We talked about, remember when Jared Curtis, #1 quarterback at the time, visited with Bill Belichick? What did that mean? So whenever something interesting happens, we're going to talk about it. And there is something very interesting, in my opinion, going on right now. Ryder Lyons is the #1 uncommitted quarterback in all of high school football. And I bring it up because we've seen BYU make major recruiting moves in basketball with AJ DeBonsa. Well, he's uncommitted, recently cut his list. He is down to BYU and Oregon. And no, this isn't really like DeBonsa, but we're going to talk about it anyway. I think this kid might end up at BYU. So let's go ahead and dive in. So Ryder Lyons, as you can see at the bottom of your screen, #4 quarterback nationally, but he's the #1 uncommitted quarterback in all of high school football. He's from Folsom, California, which is like North Central California. But for most of his recruitment, he's been very high profile, 5-star. And for virtually all of his recruitment, it felt like USC was actually the team to beat in his recruitment. California kid, you can criticize Lincoln Riley for whatever. But the thing about Lincoln Riley is this. Develops crap out of quarterbacks, right? Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams, Jalen Hurts, to say the least. Where would Jalen Hurts be if he hadn't done that 1 year at Oklahoma? So I bring it up because Lincoln Riley is a quarterback guru. This kid is from California. And oh, by the way, his brother is on the USC football roster. And so it felt like it was trending this way. But then late last week, something interesting happened. He had 3 visits set up, BYU, Oregon. He cuts the USC visit. And so I think everybody's trying to figure out why. And there's a pretty simple reason why, or at least it appears to be, okay? So backstory here. So if you follow high school football recruiting at all, you know that USC right now has the #1 recruiting class in America. Now, part of it is they have 28 commitments as we're recording here. I think everybody else is like in the 13 to 15 range. But also, over the course of the offseason, they hired a GM named Chad Bowen who came in from Notre Dame. This is all going to come together, by the way. Just let me kind of set it up. But Chad Bowen, he's one of those super well-respected guys, great relationship guy, knows everybody. But he was at Notre Dame. He takes the job at USC. And shortly after he ends up at USC, he ends up flipping a quarterback, named Jonas Williams. Jonas Williams at the time was committed to Oregon. He's from Illinois originally. He's a high 4-star, was committed to Oregon, ends up at USC. So at the time, that did not feel like much. But then this recruitment with Ryder Lyons goes on. And as I said, last week, he makes an announcement that he is, I don't know if he announced it, but it was reported. He's canceling his USC visit. So that's one. And he's down to Oregon and BYU. But the more you dig into this, the more you start to put the tea leaves together, the more you start to realize this kid may actually end up at BYU, which I think is super cool for college football. If it happens, let's go ahead and dive into why it might be BYU and what it would mean overall. Why could it be BYU? First of all, this is important to note. Ryder Lyons is LDS. Listen, we've obviously talked a lot of BYU basketball on this show. AJ DeBonsa, some of the kids that have committed. Not everybody on the basketball team is LDS. By the way, not everybody on the football team is LDS either, but it certainly helps. It's certainly an in. And it helps with recruiting, right, for BYU. Now, they haven't gotten every big-time LDS prospect in football or basketball. I remember Jabari Parker a million years ago. LDS ends up at Duke, number 2 pick in basketball. Manti Te'o was LDS. He ends up going to Notre Dame. You know that story. But a lot of good LDS players. You know, Richie Saunders is there. There's a bunch. So the point I'm trying to make is that certainly doesn't hurt, and that's certainly a variable. This is where it gets really interesting to me, though, okay? So Oregon struggling to find a QB, okay? So as I mentioned, Jonas Williams was committed early. He ends up flipping to USC late in or in February, excuse me. This, again, 4-star kid flips from Oregon to USC. So they lose him. Jared Curtis. Some people think he's the number 1 quarterback in America. Some people have Faison Brandon, who's committed to Tennessee. But Jared Curtis is down to Georgia and Oregon, commits to Georgia. So they're struggling to find a quarterback. They're bringing Ryder Lyons on campus this coming weekend. BYU next weekend is where he'll visit. Why is that noteworthy? It is because on Wednesday night, Oregon put out an offer to yet another quarterback. Producer Matt, you can pop that tweet. Bryson Beaver, great name. Not here to judge. Awesome name, though. Was committed to Boise State. Oregon offers him on Wednesday night. And Thursday, Bryson Beaver immediately decommits from Boise and now has an open recruitment. And so, again, let's put together the tea leaves. If you're committed to Boise State, maybe the best group of 5 program in college football, coming off of a college football playoff appearance, why would you decommit from Boise State unless you feel pretty good that there's a spot for you at Oregon? It's one thing for Oregon to offer, but they are hosting the top uncommitted quarterback this weekend, and you decide to decommit right before they're going to host the number 1 uncommitted quarterback in America? Because my thought process is, if I was advising him, if there's any doubt that Ryder Lyons, who you see on the screen, could commit to Oregon, just hold off. The offer's there. It's not going anywhere. It feels to me, though, like you're only decommitting unless you know this kid's coming, probably not committing, and then you come in and take that quarterback spot. Why would you want to be the second quarterback in a class? Doesn't really make sense. So you add it all up. Then from there, I'll just say this. There's a lot of buzz from a lot of people that cover recruiting 365 that BYU could be, not only could be a factor, but could be the final decision. Brandon Huffman, a guy who I have a great deal of respect for, he's a West Coast recruiting guru, works for 24/7 Sports. He has said pretty consistently, keep an eye on BYU, keep an eye on BYU, keep an eye on BYU. They're a dark horse. They're this, they're that. Well, it's down to 2, and BYU is very much in the mix. And so it'll be interesting because a couple things. One, for any BYU fan listening, one, make sure you're following our Torres on BYU page, Torres on BYU, for all your late-breaking BYU news. But 2, this should come to a head here in the next couple weeks, okay? Because Ryder Lyons has a visit to Oregon this weekend and then BYU next weekend, and then supposedly his recruitment is done. And so we should get an answer soon. I'm not promising anything, but it feels really good that everything is trending towards BYU. Now, what I'll say is this, is a couple things. Is 1, in recruiting, you never know. 2, because he's LDS, it's worth noting that he will not enroll for the 2026 season. He wouldn't enroll till 2027. So this is a kid that would commit now. All the other great freshmen would obviously enroll this, in January of this coming year. He'll enroll January of 2026. He'll enroll in January of 2026. I'm biased, and if you're an Oregon fan, you're going to get mad at me for saying this. I hope it happens. I'm just in favor of college football not becoming, in politics, we have a 2-party system. I don't want college football to just become this, everything is in the Big Ten and the SEC. They're the 2 best leagues. Nobody's arguing it. But I don't think it's good for college football if 100% of the power is found in those 2 leagues. I think it's much better if you have a contender like Clemson in the ACC. You have a contender like Miami in the ACC. You have a contender like Florida State in the ACC. You have a contender like Arizona State in the Big 12. And so BYU was very good last year. I actually thought they had more of an argument for the college football playoff than some of these SEC teams that couldn't stop whining. But The counter to that is you keep kind of building on last year and you hopefully put yourself in position to get this kid. So we'll see what happens. I would be very excited to see this kid in a BYU uniform. I think it'd be good for college football. It'd be good for the Big 12. Listen, the Big 12, I give Brett Yormark so much credit. I don't think they're going anywhere. But it'll be interesting to follow. Visiting Oregon this weekend, BYU next weekend. I'll be on a beach somewhere by the time that this kid potentially makes the decision after that BYU visit. But I just bring it up because I will be monitoring, and I think it'll be good for college football if he chooses BYU.